By here playing Raid Shadow of Legends, and I want to talk about why your champions aren't performing the way you expected. If you're like me, you probably have watched some videos, some guides around a certain champion. You go and level that champion, you gear them out, and surprise, surprise, your champion sucks. I've went through that many times, and I want to go over a few reasons of why that is. So first, I want to talk about the affinity. So I know probably everyone playing this game knows the affinity. You know when you have an advantage or when you have a disadvantage. So if you're magic affinity, you know if you're attacking spirit, you're going to have an advantage. If you're force affinity attacking spirit, you're going to have a disadvantage. So what does that actually mean? What does it mean, let's say, when you have an advantage? So we know here that a champion already has a 15% default crit chance. So when you attack with Affinity Advantage, you have an extra 15% crit chance against that weaker opponent. So when you're starting off, you're attacking them, you're already going to have a 30% crit chance against him without any gear. You also have a 30% strong hit chance. So when you get a strong hit, that's an extra 30% damage to that opponent. And the rest there, the 40% is just a normal hit. So without any gear, you're going to have 30% crit rate, 30% strong hit, and then 40% normal hit. As you gear that up, let's say you're going to gear him up and you have an additional 40% crit rate. So that's going to give you a 70% crit rate chance against that enemy. It's going to lower proportionally your strong hit and your normal hit. So as you increase that crit rate, your strong hit chance and your normal hit is going to decrease by that amount. So with 40% extra crit rate on gear, you're going to have 70% crit rate chance. Your strong hit is going to be 10% now. So that's from 30% to 10% for an extra 30% damage on a strong hit. And then 20% is going to be your normal hit. So you need to think about this when you're increasing your crit rate, you're actually going to lower your strong hit chance, which is that 30 extra percent damage. So if you don't fully utilize your crit damage along with your crit chance, you're not going to get that full amount of your benefit that you've geared him for, because you're going to be losing out on that 30% damage. So on the neutral, don't really want to talk really too much about this. So on the neutral, you don't have any advantages, you don't have any disadvantages. What you gear them as is what you're going to have. So you don't really have to worry about that. For affinity disadvantage, you're going to have, just starting off without gearing him, you're going to have a 65% normal hit chance, and you're going to have a 35% weak hit. So the reason I didn't include your 15% default crit chance is because you get a penalty for attacking a disadvantage affinity. So you're going to get a negative 15% crit rate chance. So just starting off without any gear, you're going to have 0% crit rate chance against that opponent. So on 35% weak hit, this is a locked 35%. So if we were to gear him with that same 40% crit rate chance, you're actually going to still have that 35% weak hit chance. So on a 35% weak hit chance, if you weak hit, you're going to get 30% less damage, and you can't activate your skill-based defaults, skill-based debuffs, unless that skill says it'll still do that. So something to keep in mind there, if you're not landing your debuffs, it's because you're getting those weak hits and you can't land those debuffs no matter how much accuracy you have. So with the 40% extra crit rate chance, you now have a 40% crit rate chance. So you started with 0, now you're at 40%, and your normal hit is 25%. So regardless of how high you get your crit rate chance up, you are still going to have that 35% weak hit chance. So, this is important because, every dungeon that you're going to go in, each level is going to be a different affinity. So just because you saw a guide on a champion, running through spiders, what level were they running that at? If you look here, level 18 spiders is magic, and then you have force, and then you have spirit. So that is going to drastically change the champions that you need to beat that stage. I picked spiders because it's more difficult dungeons. When you're running another dungeon like dragons or maybe ice golems, you might be able to get away with some of those disadvantages. Spiders, there are certain scenarios where you can get away with that disadvantage, but it's definitely going to change a lot of your comp up on your group based on what affinity the stage is in spiders. So I've laid out kind of a high level view here of, when you have a disadvantage, a neutral, and an advantage affinity. Just kind of quickly give you guys a recap of what this is. But just remember, as you're increasing the crit rate chance, that has different impacts for both advantage and disadvantage. So want to make sure that you guys keep that in mind, because it's probably one of the most overlooked mechanics in the game, I think. So with that, I want to go over Great Hall just real quick. So when you are looking at a guide for someone, you need to keep in mind, how their Great Hall looks, because let's say they can get 80 accuracy on a champion that needs to land crucial debuffs. So if they can do that, that frees up a lot of substats for them to either get additional accuracy, which they probably won't need if they're just running dungeons, if they have this accuracy here along with the banner. But it frees up a lot of space to get like defense percents, hit point percents, or maybe even crit damage. So keep that in mind for if you're watching a guide, what their Great Hall is, because they might be able to get certain stats that you probably might not be able to get unless you have a decent Great Hall. So another item here is when you're ascending champions. So I've picked out a couple that I haven't ascended yet just to show you how much impact it makes. And it's going to change based on, if they're legendary, epic, uncommon, rare. It's going to change based on their benefits and by character as well. But I've saved up a couple here. So I have an epic that I need to ascend to my 6-star. So here, if I ascend her, you can see the benefit here. So she's getting more hit points, more attack, which she is an attack-based character. She's getting more defense for survivability, and 10% more crit damage. Every champion is going to be a little different. Some champions, you'll get additional speed, more accuracy, along with all those defense, hit points, stats improvements as well. So keep that in mind. If you haven't fully ascended your champion, you might be missing some stats that other people have, as well as there's skills on some champions that when you ascend them, it unlocks a higher version of that skill, which could dramatically improve that champion. So keep that in mind when you're looking at champions. I'm just going to go ahead and level up this guy because I'm curious what his 6-star is here. So his 5-star, he's getting hit points, attack, and defense. Decent amount there. Every little bit helps. His 6-star, he's going to see, here's the speed. So you're getting from 97 base to 104 base. So that's a pretty big jump because, if you were to equip speed sets with him, speed sets are going to go from their base speed. That 15% extra bonus is from their base speed. So that's going to give him additional speed if you need it. And then he's getting some more defense and hit points and stuff. So keep that in mind when you're also comparing champions that you have versus a guide. You need to make sure that you've leveled them and ascended them appropriately So for levels, if you're comparing a level 50 versus a level 60, it's going to make a huge difference. You should never compare a level 50 to a level 60 and just kind of assume, well, yeah, I haven't really got that 6-star yet, but here's kind of how he pans out, and is he gonna work for me? Because it makes a huge difference. So I have an uncommon here, which is probably not going to represent just as much of an impact as probably you're going to do maybe a pretty good legendary epic. But I have an uncommon here. I've taken off all their gear just to show you the difference for their base stats. So I have a level 60, and on their base stats, he has a little over 15,000 hit points. He's a defensive champion, so I kind of want to focus on that. So he has a little over 1,000 defense. So from the level 60 to the level 50, this is level 50. He has a little under 11,000 hit points, and his defense is about 300 defense lower. It's 721. So just getting him from 50 to 60 gives me that extra 300 defense. And this is just an uncommon. So, if you have a better legendary that's defensive based, it might be a better bonus than just that 300. So keep that in mind, because that makes a big difference on what you're comparing your champions versus a guy that maybe you watched online. So along with that, defensive champions or attack champions or hit point champions. So get familiar with their skills. So Ignatius here, he's a defensive based champion. So anytime I increase his defense, his skills are going to hit harder. So along with that, you need to understand what their skills do. So in his skills, he has a debuff chance on his A1, a debuff chance on his A2, and it's an AoE. And his A3, which is also an AoE, is a hit point burn. And this is his skill that he's more known for. And it can't be resisted. So with that, I actually don't, if I would just want to focus on that hit point burn, maybe for like spiders, I don't need any accuracy. I can lower this accuracy and focus on other stats if I need that. So keep that in mind. For him, he isn't in my clan boss, and so I focused a lot of crit rate and crit damage just because I use him in arena. And for his boots, I went speed. Let's see if he'll come up here. Speed. His chest, defense, because that's going to increase his damage. And then since I maxed out his crit rate on all my substats, I went crit damage just to utilize that crit rate. Because when I talked about the affinity advantage, since I increased my crit rate, I have lost out on that strong hit potential there, that 30 extra % damage. So I want to fully capture the benefit of having crit rate. So I have increased his crit damage as well. So anytime he crits, which let's say here, which is going to be always, let's see what his total stats are. So it's 104. So he's always going to crit unless he attacks a weak affinity, because you get that negative 15% crit rate. So, for gear, you don't always have to run speed boots for your gear. For all my clan boss champions, I actually run a defensive % boots. So anytime other than speed boots, if you have a set primary stat that's not % other than speed boots, go ahead and get rid of it. If you have just a defense, not %, but a defense chest or attack chest or attack gloves, go ahead and sell it. Don't even waste your time leveling it up. You're never going to use it. But boots, you don't always have to use speed. All of my clan boss champions use a defense % speed boots or boots because in clan boss, you want to try to maximize the turns that you take against a clan boss, because you're probably going to be running poison stuff. So you want those to tick as much as possible, along with some masteries that we're going to talk about as well. Chess, I've ran defense here because she's defense based. And then also I have gloves defensive percent base as well, just to increase her damage as well as survive as long as possible. So for her skills, she is defensive base, so she's going to get more damage when she has higher defense. But she also has crucial buffs for the team, and so you need to keep that in mind. Know your champions, because in the Masteries here, and I'll try to move my camera here real quick. So in the Masteries, I have went down a pretty standard clan boss offensive mastery tree to get this War Master. Since her A1 doesn't hit 3 more times, I'm going to use War Master to try to get that proc to get a lot of damage. And she's in lifesteal, so she's going to heal. The other mastery that you like to use is Giant Slayer for clan boss. But for her crucial buffs, I wanted to get Lasting Gifts to try to extend that. Try to extend that defensive percent buff and try to extend that counterattack. So know your champions, and figure out, what gear they need, what masteries they need, and what content you're going to run them in. I'll go through one more example here. Don't want to bore you guys, but so Ragland, I use her mainly for arena, and she gets me out of jams. So I have increased her resistance to hopefully resist any debuffs that are going to cripple my arena team. Excuse me. That way, she has a skill that removes the debuffs as well as heals. So for her, I use a stalwart gear, because in arena, there's going to be a lot of AoE attacks, and I wanted her really fast, so I got speed gear. For her masteries, I have went down defensive tree and support. And mainly I went the defensive tree because I wanted extra resistance. And then I did get a counterattack opportunity as well, because her A1 increases the cooldown of 3 champions on my team by 15%. So, every champion is going to be a lot different. There's numerous ways to build your champions. But when you watch a guide online, figure out, some of those things, as far as what content you're going to run the champion in, what level you're going to run the champion, and, what gear do you have on hand, what's your guild hall at, and, what masteries might benefit you the most, because that's going to make a big difference in if you have a champion that's awesome or if you have a champion that sucks. There's a lot of different mechanics in this game, and it's best to know, all the ins and outs, especially that affinity. I think that's highly important that a lot of people don't really look into to fully understand. But I hope that helps. Let me know if you guys have any ideas about additional ways that maybe people kind of miss on, leveling up and gearing their champions and doing the right content. But hopefully that helps, and hopefully that gets you what you need to improve your champions that you currently have. Anyways, thanks for listening. Please subscribe, and I'll see you guys later. Thank you.